Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Motor City Mad Mile Show. Yes, I'm loud. If I had a lot of Diet Mountain Dew, yes, of course I have. And of course, I'll be taking the midnight drive to Detroit, Michigan on some other business. But before I hit the road, I want to say hello to my special guest tonight, Jack, former Los Angeles Dodgers first baseman Jack Perconte. Thanks for being on the broadcast.
It's a pleasure, Scott. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Well, folks, I can tell you one thing. I've known Jack for a while, and I'll tell you one thing about this guy. He's one of the nicest people on the planet, and he has something a lot of players would be envious of. He has a world championship ring. He played for the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1981 and had a few other stops. So, what we're going to do first, Jack, is we're going to get the baseball stuff out of the way. And I know you're promoting a book tonight called 365 Peak Sports Mentality Quotes, and I am really looking forward to going ahead and hearing more about this book as well as your journey into writing as well as marathons. But with that said, okay, no show when it comes to the Dodgers would be complete unless you had a couple of Tommy Lasorda stories.
Yeah, there was never a dull moment around Tommy, obviously, as anybody that knows anything about him. There's many stories, and some I was there for, and some I just heard through the other players. But I guess my one of my favorites uh, was when we were on the Dodger airplane, and we were flying somewhere to another city, and Tommy tells our press secretary, he says, get George on the phone, So, no big deal. So the press secretary comes back a few minutes later and says, he's in a meeting right now, Tommy. And so Tommy goes, okay. So it's not a minute or two later, and the press secretary comes back with the phone and he says, the president's on the line. And it
Oh
was
boy.
actually George Bush that he had called. And Bush called him back immediately after. And that's who Tommy was, but anyway, Tommy, I guess, gave him a pep talk for 5 or 7 minutes because he was going through a tough time in our country, which is probable. But anyway, that was really funny that George Bush would call Tommy back within a couple seconds of his call to him. So that was quite funny. So
Well,
um,
one thing about Tommy Lasorda, he's my first major interview in this industry, and I'll tell you one thing. If you're a young guy out there and you are looking for to get off to an incredible start, you couldn't start off better with Tommy Lasorda. You talk about all these compliments and giving an 18-year-old. Okay, holy moly! And by the way, it doesn't hurt that he ended up winning a world championship either. So now I'm talking to the world championship manager, and he's saying a lot of nice things to me, and it was a great interview. I mean, the one thing I can tell you is Phil Pepe. I'm sure you remember him of the New York Daily News, right? He
sure.
said I asked him if he's one of my people that I always used to refer back to help me come up with some questions. So he gave me four. But Scott, he said, Scott, here's the deal. Tommy Lasorda will talk a lot. You will have no problem coming up with follow-up questions. I guarantee you. And you know what? Phil Pepe was so right, and I had a blast. So I just wanted to get that story out there. So, any other interesting Tommy Lasorda stories?
Well, I always remember the one he used to tell it himself, but it was very humorous. Also, is when you remember Steve Sachs, and Steve was going through
Oh
the
yeah.
throwing yips a little bit, and he was
Mm-hmm.
struggling a little bit with his accuracy, to say the least. And Tommy pulled him aside one day before a big game, and he said, "Steve," he goes, "we're going to be playing in front of 10 million people today," and he goes, "and you're going to lead off the game, and Steve, you're going to get a base hit." And he goes, "None of those 10 million people could do that." And he goes, "And then Steve, you're going to get on first base and you're going to steal second." And he goes, "And those 10 million people can't do that." He goes, "And then you're going to go out to second base and you're going to field a ground ball." And he goes, "And they can't do that either." He goes, "But Steve, every one of those 10 million can throw that ball accurately 20 feet to first base." So that, that's so Tommy, and whether that's true or not, I don't know. But he always told the story about Steve.
Well, amazingly enough, I know when he was NBC had it. They had the baseball. I don't know if it's a baseball bunch, but they had an interesting show, and they called him the Wizard, I believe, if I remember right. and there was nobody I don't think that could have played that role better than Lasorda. I mean, it really was. I mean, and you talk about the guy. I wish who knows if he could have ever met Sigmund Freud for crying out loud, because he had more ways to go ahead and have a lot of psychology than Freud would. But
Absolutely.
but yeah, I mean, and then can you imagine many years later when he had Kirk Gibson? The only hit he gets, he went deep and, and hit it out in '88 against the Oakland A's, and that set the tone for what would be a Dodgers World Championship. So can you
Right.
imagine what the conversations would have been like with Kirk Gibson?
Yeah, it's Tommy could make you run through a wall, after you listen to him, you're ready to charge through a brick wall for him, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Jack, you want a ring with the Dodgers, 1981. You said you got a ring. So, why don't you tell me what that experience was like for you to be a part of a championship season? You do have a ring. Most people would love to have one, but at least you do have one.
Yeah, I was fortunate because I wasn't a big part of the team at all. I was just up during the season, and so the Dodgers were very generous and gave all the players who were up that helped during the season, gave us a ring and a World Series trophy. So, I cherish those to this day. And when you're part of a championship, there's just nothing like it. And I was more part of them in the minor leagues, but it's still a feeling you never forget, and it creates a bond with your teammates that never goes away. So
Right.
there's just something special about winning it all with a group of guys that it's a long season, 7 months, day in and day out, and you go through it, and only one team can come out on top. So to come out and be a world champion and have a little proof of it with a ring and a trophy is, something I cherish to this day. And like you say, no one can take that away from me.
Do you go ahead and stay in touch with some of those teammates from that 1981 team?
Not as much as I would like. Most of my friends, I came up with the Dodgers, and we came up through the minor leagues together, and those are the guys that I stayed in touch with after I got out of the game. But with each year, it's a little harder and harder. But guys like Mike Sosha and Mickey Hatcher, I played with those guys and came up, and they were on the team, obviously, and Bobby Mitchell, Ron Renicky, guys like that were, like I say, we're if we called each other tomorrow, even though we haven't talked in a few years, it would be like just talking to them like we did yesterday. So we're still, have that bond and that friendship that never goes away.
It's amazing how you say that, because the one thing about baseball compared to some of the other sports out there, you can be away from something for so long. And I've had this many, many, many times happen to me, especially since I grew up in this industry, as a writer with the New York Yankees system, covering Fort Lauderdale. And I met some pretty good people. And then that actually went up with me. Kevin Rand is a guy, Rex Hudler, just to name a few. And of course, Barry Foote was a manager for a while. And all these guys here, it's like, I've been, Brian Butterfield's another one. But when I think of these people, who've been away from, oh, they remember your name, man. Once upon a time, we were learning this stuff, and all of a sudden, but baseball's a small world. People don't forget about you. They just don't. And I think that's what makes it a really enjoyable to me, just to be able to know that of all the sports, the relationships I have, I even have a baseball show that you were on a while back, and I'm able to do it because of the relationships that I've been able to build throughout the years. And I don't see a lot of that camaraderie with a lot of the other sports as we do with baseball.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is because of the minor leagues.
Right.
You come up through the system, and you're with guys that year in and year out when they're struggling. You just don't know them at the top of their game. You see them, when they're in the minor leagues, and we're all toiling to get there. And when you finally get there, it's just you know, uh, something that you feel like you've done together and with your
Right.
friends, and you made it up. So like I say, it's not like everybody was a big bonus baby in baseball, and
Right.
you're all of a sudden you're a superstar, at the highest level. And in baseball, most guys, there's a few obviously, and it's changed a little bit, but back when I played, you had to work your way up, and it was tough, and it was years usually before you made it up to the big leagues. So by the time, if you did, we're fortunate to get there, you had a quite a relationship with the guys you were with.
Well, you talked about Mike Sosha. The guy had a heck of a career as a manager for the Angels and yet won a world championship with the Crosstown Rhinos. Were you surprised that he had that good of a run?
No, not at all. If you knew Mike and you played with him, nothing surprised you that he would become a great manager. It was, the Dodgers had a bunch of guys that, I could predict would become managers because they were just so uh, upbeat and inspirational and just knew the game so well. So there's, Sosha, Dusty Baker was with the
Yeah,
Dodgers
there's
with me.
another one.
Ron Renicky was went to the Brewers and managed a few years and was really
Right.
good. Davey Lopes was a big league manager. So many of those guys were just, they had great character along with knowing the game. And so it didn't surprise you at all. And Sosha was always one of our leaders on the team. So no surprise at all.
Tommy was sort of always raved about. Steve Sachs and Bill Russell too as high character players as well, and it came up with that group or as what we call nowadays the core.
Yeah, well, it was very evident to me because I came up with the Dodgers. I was drafted by the Dodgers, and I was with them for 4 or 5 years in the minors, and then a little in the majors, and then I got traded to the different organization, and it was just different. It was the caliber of person that the other team, had around in the minors was way different than what the Dodgers. The Dodgers really seemed to draft character guys along with obviously good ball players.
Well, not only that, they spent good money on the farm system as well.
Well, yeah,
Oh, they did.
yeah,
Yeah, I
it
covered
all
them when they
did.
were at Vero Beach down here, and I'm telling you, the players that I saw go through the Vero Beach system. Oh my gosh, we
It
don't
was
have that much time tonight to tell you that one.
absolutely that was yeah fabulous times back then, and yeah, you really noticed the difference when I went to different organizations.
Well, in the Yankees, you know how much money they always spend on their farm system, and George Steinbrenner took a lot of pride in how much money he spent there as well. So let's see, we have some activity in the chat room. Do we? Let's see. Do we? There we go. All right. Well, anyways, well, there we go. There we go. All right. So, but that said, Jack, okay, you talk about the trade, and to me, the trade that you're referring to was with the Cleveland Indians, as I understand. I believe Jorge Ordo. I don't really care about the players, but what was it like when you went out there and finally had an opportunity to go play for the Cleveland Indians after leaving a World Championship team?
Well, the writing was on the wall for me in LA that I wasn't going to be there starting second baseman. So, to me, it was just wonderful that I got an opportunity, like you said, to go somewhere else and
Right.
try to prove that I could be an everyday player. And unfortunately, my time in Cleveland didn't go well. I just played terribly. And
Right.
so it just didn't work out for me. But at the time when I first was traded, it seemed like a perfect opportunity and there was an opening there, and I actually earned a job in spring training, so it all went well through then. But
Right.
then once shortly into the season I lost confidence and I never regained it, so it was
Right.
a tough year for me, and I felt bad that I wasn't able to help the Indians because we did have a lot of talent. We just didn't
Right.
play well, and I was part of that.
Now, one thing I want to talk about, and some Merrill obviously was telling me this as I was covering the Fort Lauderdale Yankees. You once told me that lefties get to the big leagues quicker. I know pitchers definitely. I know one guy that stands out is Ray Fontenot of the Chicago Cubs. He had a 4-year career, but I don't think if it were any fact that if he was a left-handed pitcher, he'd be lumped with all the writers. You wonder with his erratic control whether he even gets that much time. But you're talking about left-handed pitchers are a commodity, and of course we talked about it early on that even a left-handed hitter, which you were, okay, you have the left-handed hitter versus right-handed pitcher matchup. So do you feel that in some cases, Jack, that being a left-hander of some sort hitting or otherwise that it is a benefit to you at least to get to the majors? Now whether you stay there is another story, but at least getting to the majors is one thing, but staying there. But what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it was huge for me because, speed was a big part of my game. And so to be on the left side and be able to get to first quicker, whether it was a bunt or just a slap hit in the infield, all those, that was a huge advantage for me. So it helped my on base percentage. And just to be able to face more right handed pitchers than lefties was an advantage. So yeah, it
Right.
definitely was big, but most of it was had to do, I think, with the speed part of it. Being able to get to first a little quicker from the left side is a
Right.
big advantage. And I'm glad to see the speed starting to come back into the game again, where it's important again.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point. I know we were talking a little bit about today's baseball, but the fact of the matter is, we're starting to see speed. We have the bigger base paths out there. I don't know how much of a difference that really is, but for a while it was either strikeout or home run. And, feast or famine, as they call it, rob deer, either you hit the long ball or you don't hit the ball. What are your thoughts about the way that some of the rule changes is actually impacted the game now?
Yeah.
I think to myself that when you go out there and realize that sort of thing, that to me, it's the type of thing that I always wonder about in my mind that, you have the pitch clock and all that, right? So, what are your thoughts about the way the game of baseball is in terms of some of the changes that they've made?
You know, I kind of I'm happy about them. I mean, even though I'm a little old school, probably, but I think they were necessary. The game got to be unwatchable there for a few years. With like you said, it was, you could watch for 15, 20 minutes sometimes, and a ball would never be put in play. It was either a walk, a strikeout, or if it was put in play, like you say, it might be a home run. But it was just becoming unwatchable. There's no stolen bases, no hit and run, which it took the contact part away. And so I think it was necessary. And I think it's hitters are starting to learn to adapt to the pitching somewhat, but I think it was good in general. I like to see old school baseball, the bunt back in the game, stealing and hitting runs and just moving the runner over and things like that. I think that's, the, that makes baseball baseball. And without all that, it just wasn't a lot of fun.
So then, do you approve of a lot of the changes that Commissioner Manfred has made to try to improve the game?
I think, yeah, for the most part, I do. I can't say I know every rule change or if it's been a benefit, but I think he's had good people studying it and that it's helped the viewership for sure, and I know I've been to a few games the last few years at the major league parks, and I just enjoyed them more because the pace is faster. You don't have time to look away. The pitch is coming and the action's on the field. So I think it's a plus for the most part.
All right, so we have a question out there. What's your favorite ballpark to play in?
My two favorites were always Dodger Stadium, of course, and then Kansas City Kauffman Stadium was just,
Hmm.
to me, it was just gorgeous back in the day. And when I was in high school, I had visited that park. So to eventually play in that stadium when I got older was a dream come true. So those are always my two favorites. If I went around to a lot of the new ones today, I may not say the same thing, but to
Right.
play in, there was Dodger Stadium and Royal Stadium.
So then let me take the question and flip it. What were your two least favorite ones to play in?
Any park I couldn't hit in, which that would be quite a list that I didn't hit too well in. But Detroit, I didn't hit well in, so that was definitely on the list. Boston, even though it was so fun to play there, I just didn't hit well there.
No.
So, if you didn't hit well in a park, you couldn't rate it too highly. So, those two probably were two of my least favorite.
Well, yeah, amazingly, you talk about Tiger Stadium with that short porch in right field. At Boston, I don't know if I call that a ballpark or a bandbox.
Well, my game was to hit the ball to left field, opposite field, and just flip balls into left field. Well, with the left fielder playing so shallow, my lazy line drives to left never fell in. So
That's funny.
that didn't work too well for me.
That is funny. So, all right, you know what? It's amazing that we talked about catchers before, and me being one of them, that's a position I was made for. I was awful everywhere else. I really was. If I was in the outfield, I lost concentration. But here's what happened one day. I'm playing little league ball. Our two starting catchers don't show up. Okay. At that time, my dad was managing the team, but he never played favorites. So, in fairness to my dad, he never played favorites. But no, they didn't show up. So he asked who wanted to play the pitcher. He didn't know who wanted to play. And my arm went up so high and I was so loud. All right, go ahead. Let's see what happens. He said, I know in his mind, he's thinking, what do I got to lose putting you there anyway? He tried him at third. Got a good arm. The only problem was it was wild. Tried to put me at first. I'd get run over because it was too skinny. Put me behind the plate. And boy, you talk about a position that was natural. I mean, listen, even when I was young, okay, I got in the umpire's ears. I had no problem doing it. I used to talk to the batter and try to distract him any way I can. That way he didn't see ball, listen to me. Boy, I helped my pitcher out, right? I got nailed for more catcher's interference than you can imagine. I got nailed with some more foul balls. And if that wasn't bad enough, I used to go out there and take extra mound visits, which you couldn't get away with today anyway. And all of a sudden, I had everybody going crazy. And if that wasn't good enough, I used to warm up my pitchers. It's safe to say when the other catchers came back, I took the job and never got it. He had to find a place for them, and one of which quit. So now that I got that story out there for everybody to hear, including you, okay, let's talk about the catchers a little bit. You say that they learn the game more and they become really good managers. Would you say that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they got everything in front of them. They're involved in every pitch, every play, positioning. So uh, yeah, they learn the game, and so many of them, like Mike Socia, we mentioned, are just become great managers because that's kind of what they do on the field. They kind of manage the game. So um, if you're a young kid and you want to be involved in every play and not have much distractions, become a catcher.
Oh yeah, no, I love that position. It was made for me. The only regret I have is after I left that part of ball, that I ended up over in pony ball, being an infielder. I regret that move, but it was just hard on my knees. And when you're young and you take a beating like I did, I took a beating like nobody else. But I regret not playing the position at a higher level. But I learned so much from it. And over the years, though, I will tell you that as I've covered baseball and a lot of different sports, Jack, I've interviewed a lot of catchers and I've bonded real well, as you can hardly tell, right? And so I put the Marlins PR staff today. One of the guys there, and I said, "Listen, man, you got to get me a catcher this year. I have a blast with these guys. Now, let me work on it. Let me work on it." And nowadays, it's not like everybody has access to the clubhouse because of what COVID did, and now PR people have more control who they're going to let in and let the beat writers go and all that. So they'll work on that. But I'll tell you, I love interviewing catchers because you know what, Jack? When you speak the language, you speak the language. Nobody can speak it, especially when you know all the tricks that I tried to pull when I was younger. And that position was made for me. All right, let's talk about the favorite manager that you played for.
By far, Del Crandall. He had I had played with him in the minor leagues in AAA for the Dodgers, and then I got traded to Cleveland. But then he became the a manager of the Seattle Mariners, and so he traded for me from Cleveland. Gorman Thomas and I were traded to the Mariners, um, and so I played for Dell there, and he just believed in me, and so I could feel that, and that sense of belief really gave me confidence, which I was always a little short of. So with that confidence, I went out and had a couple of nice years with Seattle. So Dell was definitely um, my favorite manager. Although there was never a manager I played for that I didn't feel was good, and in my corner for the most part. So they don't get to that level without being good.
Yeah, but let's face the reality. When you have a manager that really believes in you, like Dell did, it kind of gives you that extra feel in my mind. I can't let this guy down.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to play as hard as you can for him. And then, at times when I was struggling, he just pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're my second baseman. So just relax and go out and play like you can." And, just to hear that
Yeah,
is awesome because so much in my career, it was, getting sent back to the minor leagues or that kind of thing. So to
right.
just know that, I was going to be there the next day and in the lineup. I remember one stretch I was, I think 0 for 22 or 0 for 25 or something, and really struggling. And I thought, man, I'm probably going to get benched or sent down. And I come to the park and Dell had me leading off that night. And so it's like,
Right.
okay, if I'm still leading off, he believes in me. And then I went out and got three doubles and just kept going after that. So, it just, like
Yeah.
you say, it's just a confidence builder. And no matter how great an athlete out there, they need those type of boosts at times.
Can you say that Del Crandall, Robin Yount, give me the connection?
Yeah, when Dell became his first manager job was Milwaukee Brewers, and the story goes that a young kid came up and was just in spring training they always have some youngsters up just to take a look at him. Well, 18 years old, he could see the talent in Robin Yount, and right out of spring training he made him the big league shortstop. And uh, he was the one that could see his talent and put him in there, and the rest is history. He moved eventually to center field, but Hall of Famer, and Dell's the one that got it all started for him.
Very good. So, all right, now let's talk about your life after baseball. We're going to get to your book shortly, but you've authored 4 books, and then you turn to writing, and you've run 17 marathon, and you teach youth baseball. I've got to ask you, you've run 17 to date. You plan to run your 18th in Detroit on October 20th. So, do you feel that running marathons made you mentally stronger?
Well, I found out that I had to be mentally strong in order to make it. That's for sure each
Okay.
time, and each year it seems to get a little harder. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I have to be that way, but I feel like the running makes me that way too. So because I feel like back in my career, I wasn't always that mentally strong, but now I think I've learned a lot about myself and what it takes to run, 26 miles, and what I need to, how to train, and how to go about, go about the process. And so it is a mental challenge every time I do it. But so you have to be mentally strong, but I think it also has made me mentally stronger to do it.
Yeah. I mean, running isn't the easiest thing in the world. I remember a long time ago when I was trying to lose weight, I didn't mind walking on the beach at Deerfield Beach. I enjoyed that too until my knees started to break down. But then again, I always work so much harder and overextend myself. It leads me into trouble. You, I'm sure, were a lot smarter than that. Me, forget it. There's no hope there. But when you think though, when you're doing that many miles, I mean, how do you train for races like that?
Well, they have programs, and like you said, you can't just go out and start running 10 miles tomorrow. You have to build up, and there's a process. So it takes about 18 weeks actually to train for one. So, there's a process where you'll, gradually go from 5 to 8 to 10 to 12. And, each week you're up in your load. And by the, about a month before the race, I'm running about 45, 50 miles a week. And then you taper off to get strong again by race day. But there's a program you follow, and it's not easy in the summer sometimes, and it's 85, 90 degrees out with high humidity. So I have to get up at 4 in the morning to run in order to not die in the heat. But it's a challenge I look forward to. I've been so fortunate to stay healthy. That's everything, and I've been given a body that has been able to keep up the work so far. So you never know when that might end, but so far I've been healthy, and so I'll ride it as long as I can.
More power to you. For those of you just joining us, Scott Morgan, Motor City Man Mouse Show, pleased to be joined by former Los Angeles Dodgers second baseman Jack Perconte. Jack Perconte played in the big leagues for about 5 years or so, but his work after baseball, folks, is as impressive as you can get. And leading to our point here, that you've authored 4 books. So what I want you to do is just talk a little bit about your first 4, and then we have your other one that we're going to spend a great deal of time on, so that everybody can, and then how you're able to get these other books, and then we're going to get to the meat of the crux here with your latest one. I'm intrigued to hear about this book here.
Yeah, I've been coaching now since I got out of the game for like 35 years. And so I feel like I've gained some knowledge along the way. And so my first book I wrote about was teaching hitting to young players,
Okay.
so how coaches and parents can help their young players hit. And then I turned the next one into helping parents just raise an athlete, the things that are important in my mind for helping kids to enjoy the games. There's a lot of pressure on them these days. And so how they can handle the pressures and make the game fun for kids again. And so that was my
Right.
second book. And then my next one, I decided to help coaches because I've been doing it to coaches how to coach teams and individuals to for the same way, to and for coaches to, there's not a lot of training for coaches. They're working other jobs, and then everybody expects them to be perfect with kids, how to deal with them. So that's not that easy. So I wrote a book for coaches to help them to deal with players and teams and how to create teamwork and so many things that go with sports. And then my next book was on my running and my marathon running. I once again, I just thought it would help people to show the process of how you train and things like that. And then, like you said, my next book uh, is I think the most important book I've written, and it's quotes for athletes. That I remember when I played, I wasn't that mentally strong, and each day sometimes was a struggle, So I wrote a book where kids every day can have something where they can get positive affirmations to what they're doing and to give them a focus for that day. And then if they want to read it at night, it's kind of a reset, a way to reprogram their mind for the next day and to be ready for the next day because it's hard to have mental strength as an athlete, and it's difficult. You run into so many obstacles along the way, and the pressures, whether it's put on yourself or coming from the outside from parents and coaches. So I thought the book, would help and just give them a daily a guide, each day to just have something where they can, feel good about themselves and what they're doing, and once again to maybe recover when things aren't going their way.
All right, so I want to talk about your book a little bit, but okay, when you leave baseball and you become a writer, and I have been for the better part of 40 years myself, I'm a firm believer that if you can be a writer, you're a great broadcaster because you have a good command of the language. And I try to teach this to the people that I'm mentoring that. But what is it about writing that you really like the most? That it's like a good mental release for you to be able to put your words on paper. And I don't hate to use the word therapeutic, but sometimes it is for me. It's therapeutic meditation a little bit to get things off your chest. People write journals all the time, and they do a lot of stuff. And writing to me is one of those types of things where if I write it down, number one, I never forget it. So my rule is when you go on the road, you better have a pad of paper with you, and you have to have a pen. I always keep a pen in my shirt, and sometimes I take a clipboard and a pencil inside of a restaurant. People think I'm crazy. Well, I've heard it before, so it really doesn't matter, anyways. But what about you? How do you feel about writing just in general?
Yeah, that you hit it on the head, the therapeutic part, but also it's the creativity for me because always most of my life I felt like I was not creative at all. Like I just, you know, I just had nothing in me. And then when I stopped working so hard, I started realizing my mind actually had some ideas. And when I start writing, I can just go and go and go. And it just amazed me that I was creative in a sense. And so I love that part of it to be creative. And then, like you say, just I got it. I just have to put it down, and then if you edit enough, it sounds halfway decent, So,
Right.
but yeah, I really enjoy it. I tell everybody, a lot of friends say, I've thought about writing a book, and I just tell them, if you know things or you feel like you know things that no one else knows, then you owe it to yourself to write it down, and maybe it becomes a book. Who knows? So, but yeah, I just really enjoy writing so much.
Well, just for you folks out there, my book is called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. And this is an accumulation of over 40 years worth of stories. And I'm going to be writing a second part to this thing later in the year. So whatever didn't get in this book here, I will definitely be adding some things. Because there's a lot of things that change in our industry that I certainly want to bring people up to date. But I got obviously the most important stuff, the background information in there. Jack obviously wrote a book, which now I'm going to go into more specifics with. The first one thing I like about your book already when I'm looking at it is I love the title. You have to have a good title in order to go out there and get people's attention. When I write my baseball book, I have a great title that I actually got from a friend of mine in the chat room in Facebook, but that'll be a baseball book. But I'm going to break down the title of your book word by word. Okay. 365 peak sports mentality quotes. I mean, that to me is alone strong because you're talking about 365 days a year. It's not a very complicated read because, hey, we're just talking about Monday of the year. Do you talk about it in a calendar year or how do you go ahead and break down the 365?
Well, it is basically, yeah, that was the idea, to have one a day. And but I didn't put it in calendar years. I just numbered them because, if you buy the book in June, I didn't want them to have to,
Right. Okay.
either know when to start or anything. And
Right.
but anyway, yeah, there's one a day, but also you might want to read two or three a day. And I have
Right.
it broken down into what I think goes into peak sports mentality, like goals, perspective, uh, so many other things, and overcoming adversity and things like that. So there's quotes that are specific to just that. So if you have a young player that maybe um, doesn't really seem goal oriented, they can go right to the goals section and read some of those quotes and pass them on to their players. And that might help them to feel inspired towards becoming more, setting some goals up. Or, there's a section on resilience, which obviously we all need. And
Right.
I've had a lot of people that aren't sports people that have read the book and said, it helps me. It's not just for athletes, it helps anybody day to day, just kind of have a focus and, like I say, uh, help them to, um, kind of shape their mind in a good, positive way. We all need that. So I
Right.
read once where the mind is like a garden where we plant the seeds. And that's how I feel the book is. It's kind of plants the seeds for each day. Where you have something, or like I say, you might want to read three or four of them. And I know when I run, I got a lot of time out there, and so I just kind of reflect on some of my quotes, and they help me to have something to think about and try to
Mm-hmm.
understand. So along with each quote, I give a short explanation of what it means, and so even though it says 365 quotes, there's two or three times that number of ideas in the book that I think can help players and people.
That's incredible because you know what? What you did here is the model that I have. Even though I talk about lessons from the microphone, it's important that your book reaches as many places as it goes, not for people to view it as a baseball book. So, for example, even in the book that I have, I have it for people that want to learn about the media or students that can use it as a textbook. Yeah, but yet, I don't care what part of the world you're in, you can still be able to generate certain ideas that apply both past and present, old school, new school, and all that. And that's what makes me so fascinated about your book. Now, as I break down, okay, the other part, daily winning words of wisdom. Come on, who in their right mind would not want to know any more words of wisdom? Whether you're a baseball player or not, which in your case, obviously, baseball was your living for a while, and then you were able to mastermind your way to go ahead and succeed beyond the diamond. So tell me what daily winning words of wisdom means to you and what everybody should interpret from that.
Well, yeah, it's pretty much what it says, is the daily part, like we kind of talked about. And then just when I say winning, I don't necessarily mean being the best player or coming out on top always. It's just kind of winning life, which means, becoming better each day. And so that's one of my quotes in there, I'm sure, something to the effect of, the goal isn't to win. The goal is to be better tomorrow than you were today, and that's kind of where the book comes from, is just daily winning words of wisdom to kind of, um, feel good about yourself, and that you're learning and progressing. I work with kids all the time, and I just see how they get so down on themselves so quickly these days, and the pressure that's put upon them. And it's just different than many years ago, I think. And so they need something that can help them to just cope and feel like they can keep perspective in things, and keep the fun in things, but mostly having a good perspective about not just sports but life itself. And so, um, with younger players, I need coaches and parents to pass the information on to those kids. But once you become I've had a lot of 13, 14 on up kids read the book themselves, and they just enjoy some of the things, in it to help them deal with their day-to-day pressures.
Great. Okay, so how many pages is the book?
It's about 150 or so
Okay. How long
pages.
did it take you to write it?
A long time.
Did
All
it?
books take a
Okay.
long time, and as you know, you get the information down, and then you edit, and keep editing until it sounds
I
exactly how
know.
you want it to sound, and then you
I
put it
tell you.
aside for a while, and then you go back and edit some more, and you can't believe you wrote what you wrote. You're like, man, I can do that better. So
Yeah.
it's a constant work in progress, but it took a few years. I've been writing so much that I was able to go back and pick some of the things I'd written in the past and kind of mold them into quotes that I felt like will help people. But it's a process.
You know what I did when I wrote my book? You see this thing, my index card? I would outline everything on one chapter one, two, three, four, and the beat goes on and on. And I would use this thing here just to give me a guideline. Then I'll let the writing take over. And it worked. And that's what I'm going to use for the next books I write because it worked out. So, Jack, would you say that it's an easy read?
Yeah, for sure. And like I say, you can kind of read as little as you want each day or as much. I've had a lot of people that text me back or email me and say, "Hey, I read half the book in one sitting," and then other people prefer to just maybe read, a quote a day. So that's easy if they want to go that way.
Right.
So you can deal with the book any way you want. At the very beginning, I set out actually before I even get to the 365, which is meant to be one a day, but I write 20 quotes at the very beginning that I feel like athletes need every day of the year. So those are the ones I call um, quotes that they need. Like I say, constants every day. I need these affirmations, and so they're kind of the probably the most important ones I wrote. And then once again, once you get into the book, there's sort of a day idea. Or like I say, if you want to, my last section is on integrity and gratitude,
Right.
which I feel are a big part of peak performance.
Right.
Um, to have integrity and gratitude. So, if coaches feel like their team needs something in those areas, or a parent feels like their son or
Mm-hmm.
daughter needs, to be more grateful for what they have, then they can go right to those sections, and just read a few
Right.
quotes in those areas. So it's kind of read it as you want to, as much as you want or as little as you want. And I still feel
Right.
like it can be helpful.
Well, that's good. Do you have any pictures in it at all?
No pictures now.
No, that's okay. Well, it's
Yeah.
having sounds like to me the way the book is broken down, you don't need them because anytime you have something broken down in sections, you don't need pictures. Some books require more pictures. So how do you actually market the book?
Well, that's never been my strength. I just try to do it online a little bit, and I'll just.
Yeah.
I feel like this book anyway. There's no time frame on it, so it'll still be pertinent 5, 10 years from now. And so I'll just take my time and try to get the word out, and slowly. I appreciate you having me on and talking about it. That helps. But yeah, I give away a lot of them to my students, and where I work, I have a ton of coaches there. And so I just like to give them a book and say, hey, there's some ideas in here that I think your kids would like and your players. And if you would let them know about it, that helps. And so in time, hopefully it'll reach, as many people as it can.
One idea is you might want to donate a few to the libraries too if you ever want to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right.
That's something I'll eventually do. But the one thing I can tell you right now that I think is great about it, and I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it, is it comes from a guy that played baseball. And I know of all the four major sports, I'm talking baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. You know, Baseball is the most difficult from a mental standpoint because you play 162 regular season games. You have spring training if you're fortunate to get the postseason. So there's more failure mentally in baseball than the other ones. I'm not trying to say there isn't any mental aspect to hockey, but it's a much faster paced game. Basketball, let's face the reality, you have a lot, they're more athletic. Okay, so we got basketball, hockey, football. Well, yeah, you got a lot of stunning involved, but again, it's bang, 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 hitting everybody. Where baseball, let's face the reality, guys like Michael Jordan didn't succeed in baseball. They realized, you know what? And he, to me, if you could go ahead and fail, you know, if you're hitting 1 for 3, that means you're at 300. You're a Hall of Famer. If you're hitting 275 and you're succeeding 27.5% of the time, you're doing fantastic. Once you get to 200, all of a sudden I'm in a slump, and then I go ballistically crazy. Oh my goodness, the whole world's caving in on me. Oh, blah, blah, blah. So, do you feel that with your baseball background, that it enabled you to be able to write a book like this, knowing there's so much more failure in this sport than any other sport?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a game of failure for sure. And, you learn more from failure, as they say sometimes, than
Right,
from success. But it's the day in and day out, like you say, the day in and day outness of baseball. It's just nonstop. And, and it's the nice part about the game. If you go for five one night, you don't have to wait too long to make up for it the next night. But when you do get into a slump, it's obviously makes it worse too. But yeah, it's the mental grind is just something that you can't explain to people, and it's so real. And so that definitely helped me write this book. It wasn't hard to think back to those days and think of things that, and like I say, in the dedication to the book is I actually wrote it to what I said, my former self,
right,
because it's something I could have used, you know, 40 years ago, is the
right.
idea of having some mental strength help day to day. And so I kind of wrote it to myself too. But yeah, baseball definitely will help. And by running out, when I run, that also helps, gives me a lot of ideas, and my running spurs my brain sometimes to come up with quotes that I feel like are um, pertinent and helpful.
Well, let's face the reality. Wisdom comes from what a lot of sports generate. Even NASCAR has a lot of stress as well. Every sport that you participate has a lot of stress. But again, I am going to be partial toward baseball because we all know that when you have a lot of strikeouts, and you're hitting on low average, it doesn't take much. But Don Mattingly once told me, and I know I've seen it over the years, but it's good for a guy like him to reinforce it, that let's discount the minor leagues, okay, for a period from Class A all the way to Double A. Now the transition from Double A or Triple A to the bigs, this is where the strong survives. You can be hitting to cover off the baseball in Triple A, and then all of a sudden you can't do anything. In fact, for Detroit Tigers first baseman Spencer Torkelson recently got sent down, and obviously he was drafted number 1 overall by the Tigers a few years ago. He'll bounce back, but you talk about highly coveted players that get humbled by this sport. They really, really do. And again, a lot of this is attributed to what you have written about. It's just how you come up with specific examples. To me, it's all there, no matter what person or individual that you mention.
Yeah, for sure. Everybody, you know, no matter how great they are, I guarantee they have some kind of confidence issues. It's just like such a daily thing. You can be on top of the world one day and then everything comes crashing down the next, and especially with hitting a baseball. So,
Yeah,
your confidence is going to be up and down, and those that are, can become, a little mentally stronger, have a chance to survive. And with
right,
hitting, it's just, you know, like you mentioned, you can be good in the minor leagues because every hitter has a hole in their swing. But at the major league level, once they find it, they're going to exploit it. So unless you learn to adjust at that level, then you're not going to succeed. So whereas in the minor leagues, it kind of gets glossed over a little bit. But at that big league level, they'll find your weakness, and so you either have to adjust or go home in a sense.
so tell me your favorite player to watch.
I have so many of them that, I like the smaller players that just get singles and doubles and not necessarily the home run hitters. So those are kind of my favorites, but there's many of them. The guys that get on base and steal bases, I like all those guys. So I'm a little partial, I guess, to the Dodgers. My whole family's White Sox fans, but that's hard to claim right now. But yeah, I just like players that give 100% day in and day out. I really admire the guys that play 162 games a year, which is incredible because that's not something, most guys can do. And I never played 162 in a season, but to go out there and play every game all year, you got to love those guys, your Freddie Freemans and Marcus Simeons, guys like that just are in the lineup every day. It's just truly amazing.
Yeah, I saw Marcus Simeon the other day. What a player! But then again, when you based on what your characterization is, how do you not appreciate a guy like Lou Gehrig and Cal Ripken? I mean, if there's ever a record that'll never be broken, it's that one. I wondered myself if Gehrig's would, but Cal Ripken Jr. was the right guy to do it. He really was because he definitely know that I'm going to work every day, and that record will never be touched. So
Yeah, it's
so
just too
when
much.
you have a book like this, okay, we've talked about how it's able to benefit everybody, right? Have you ever had the opportunity to do much public speaking on this? Because this is a great topic, and somebody asked me about public speaking for myself, and I said, to me, the only thing that I would ever consider public speaking on is how you have to be a good writer to be a good speaker. But you got to have some sort. You've had to have had offers to public speak with a book along these lines.
Just a little bit, and I really haven't reached out into that area much, but I won't rule it out down the line. But I feel like I'm so busy with all this other stuff and writing and still coaching and running and have a family with 9 grandkids now, so
Oh,
I don't
okay.
feel like there's too much time to branch off into something else. But I have thought about that, and I do, like you say, I think my book is conducive towards that type of audience. But maybe down the line I may, but right now I haven't.
Listen, when you got grandchildren and you're healthy enough to spend time with them, who knows? For all I know, your grandchildren could be looking at these books and you're trying to instill a lot of these beliefs in them to make them successful human beings as they get older too. There's some substance and merit to what you're doing there. That's for sure, and I think that's great. I mean, like I said, there isn't anything about this particular book, okay, that I can tell you that I can't wait to get my hands on this thing because you know what? What I always like to do for my wisdom, Jack, and being you, knowing that you worked in the LA area, is I always go ahead and look at John Wooden's Pyramid of Success. And every time I need something to help me out a little bit and gain words of wisdom, I'll go to that. And what I would do, even as a young reporter, as I've grown up, is I would ask coaches, writers, or anybody that I like. Larry Bird was a favorite of mine when I needed advice. I worked with John Shula, those are just a couple of, and Coach Wooden. How do you not ask him any questions to get words of wisdom? Not only because it makes me better as a professional, but as better as a human being. And I think anytime you could draw from successful people, I mean, we're all students and sponges until we no longer are able to do either of the above. And I think in my mind that you've got a dynamo here. And so, all right, with that said, okay, who are some of the people that you learned from the most over the years?
I had so many, I think in high school, I don't know if you ever heard of a guy by the name of Gordy Gillespie, but he's a legend where I grew up in Joliet, Illinois, one of the winningest coaches ever. But he was probably my first one that I really looked up to and learned so much from, and just, about life and sports. And then at college, I had another great coach there by the name of Johnny
Mm-hmm.
Reagan, and he was just outstanding. And just, guys that show you how to live as much as tell you how to live. They just show
Right.
you how uh, to do things the right way. And then in professional ball, I had a lot of managers, but other players too that kind of
Right.
helped you understand how to go about things. And like I'd mentioned, Del Crandall, he was probably the most influential to me. But um, and then just Nowadays, I still learn a lot from my family members. My kids are people I learn from, and I'm around other coaches day in and day out when I
Right.
teach and that. And so there's just so many people to learn from, and you have to have that attitude that you can each day go about trying to learn something.
How would you describe today's younger generation in terms of the ability to be coached? I know a lot of times, and I've heard a lot of people criticize today's younger generation that they take things for granted, they're entitled and all that. And I think there's a lot of accuracy to that. Some are coached, some, I mean, they are. And I do believe in that to a large extent, but there are some younger people that are really willing to learn and they're extremely bright and all that. But do you find that the difference between today's young adult versus yesteryear's young adult is substantially different?
I don't see that. I think that they have more distractions now, which makes it
Okay.
tougher. They're into so many different things, and I think that sometimes makes it tough. When I grew up, it was baseball in the summer and football in the fall and basketball in the winter, and that's all we ever did. Nowadays, they're into a million different things, and so I think that makes it a little tougher. But but in general, I feel like kids are most of them are. I mean, that's I put it on myself. If they're not putting out and working hard, then that's why I'm there. I'm the coach. I got to get them to find a way to get them to work hard, and usually I'm able to do that for the most part. And so, um, yeah, I don't think kids have changed all that much. Once again, the pressure on them is more intense nowadays. I think the money involved in the game makes it tough. All the travel costs and all that parents have to uh, fork over. And I give private lessons. I get paid for giving them lessons, so they expect results. And
Hmm.
the kids, they're putting a lot of money into their kids nowadays, and so they want to see results and they want to see effort from their kids. So the pressure on them is higher, I think, and the tensions are a little greater. But as far as kids themselves, I feel like they're pretty much the same for the most part.
So, in and out of the athletic world, that's how you feel about today's kids, in and out. Now, because let's face it, you are right. You have the internet. Everybody's on their phone doing videos. I mean, I've never seen anything so wild. Now I know why we send all these astronauts in space to dump satellites because now we're doing this thing together, and I'm not all the way out in Lisle, Illinois. Okay, doing this, which is cool. I mean, let's face it, we put all those satellites on here. Scott and Jack are talking on a Wednesday night here on the Motor City Mad Mouse show. Then I can appreciate it. I guess depending on the attitude of the kid. Let's face it, I won't bring on anybody unless they know it's up front. I'm going to coach you hard. If you can't handle it, leave. Okay, I don't have time for it. But yet, you still want to be able to make an impact in a young adult's life if you have the material for which to do so. And I think that to me is extremely important to try to attempt to do that. So, again, I'm amazed by your book, and I think the potential is definitely there. And if there's any way that I can help you market it along the line, don't ever hesitate to let me know. I'll do everything I can to be able to do that. Maybe I'll have our Candy, if you have a link that you can send to us, maybe we'll put it on the South Florida Tribune website. So that's another link for everybody to go out there and take a look at it because you were so gracious enough with your time. So, let's face it, when we were growing up, we only had what, three, four, five, six TV stations. So you took what you ended up getting. Now you have thousands. And by the way, Jack, there is streaming. Okay. Well, now there's 9 million different ways to find what you want. Okay. And back then, so that's what they get today. And we 6, 7. Okay. NCAA football. Take what they give you. Now you can find anything you want wherever you want to do it. So, do you have any closing thoughts about what you want people to get out of the book? And also, I want you to let everybody know how they can purchase your book.
Um, Once again, I think nowadays kids need that little extra, and this book may be that little extra that can help them and help
Right.
parents too, and help coaches. So I just think it can be helpful, and um, just the feedback I've gotten from people that have read it has been good, and they feel like it's helped them. And I've had so many parents to me say, "This is exactly what I need," and then a lot of them say, "Man, I wish their coach had this book because he could sure use these ideas, because
Right.
some of their coaches they don't feel are that efficient with their kids. But yeah, I just hope it helps. Like I always say with all my books, if it helps one person out there, I'll feel like it's been worth it. So, and the easiest way is just go on Amazon and look it up, and
Right.
that's probably the easiest way to get one.
Right. And finally, in closing, you've obviously played ball, but is there a lasting legacy that people should learn about Jack Perconte in terms of not only what you did on the field, but your accomplishments off of it? Because nowadays, or does a legacy really matter to you at all?
Um, yeah, that's a tough question, I guess. I guess just, I'm going to be 70 this year and just tell people to just, keep getting out there doing things you love. I still coach because I like it. I still write and I still run because I like those things. And so if you like them, go for them and do them as long as you can. And but yeah, I don't know about a legacy or anything. Just try to live each day to the fullest and be a good husband and a good father and grandfather to my kids. That's all I can do.
I tell people that Morris has 9 lives. I have to make the most I have. And then, of course, that to me, I live every day as where my laugh. But I'm interviewing you, and you and I are getting to know each other a little bit here on No Filter Network. This has been a pleasure having you on, Jack. So I'll mention it one more time. 365 Peak Sports Mentality and Quotes can be purchased on Amazon. I'm sure they probably have the online version on Kindle as well. So,
Right.
so I think it's been a pleasure, Jack, to have you on there. I always look forward to bringing you on when I get a chance. But more importantly, I'm looking forward to see if we can finally have an opportunity to meet when I'm in the area in latter July. So meanwhile, Jack, thanks for joining me here on the Motor City Mad Mile Show on the No Filter Network. And we're going to do everything in our power to get the word out for your book, Jack. So God bless, and I hope you continue to have much success with the book. Folks, get it. They always say knowledge is power, right? Knowledge is power, but then you have to apply it to make this guy look like a genius. Not that he isn't already, but come on. I don't know what it costs. Not going to get into that. Amazon will tell you. But you know what, Jack? Thank you very much for being on the Motor City Mad Mouth Show, and we'll definitely be in touch. So God bless to you and your family, and much success with the book. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Scott. You've been very kind to me. I appreciate it.
Well, you deserve it, man. You're a great friend, and you know what? To me, you're the BEST. So thanks back. God bless.
Right.
Okay, partner.
Take care, Scott.
You bet.
Bye bye now.
Bye.